This is Gators breakdown after the 24-10 win for the Gators over the SEC East rivals Georgia Bulldogs at the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. If I sound hoarse, if my voice sounds a little bit stressed, because it is, at the game, screaming for the Gators, cheering for the Gators, and what a fun time it was. 24-10, Gators win over the Bulldogs. This is Gators Breakdown, like I mentioned, part of SEC Breakdown. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. You can find Gators Breakdown if you're watching it right now, or you catch it on YouTube. You can find it there. You can also find it on SoundCloud and iTunes. I got all that squared away, so I got audio and video options for you to listen to Gators Breakdown. But 24-10 win for the Gators. Not necessarily prettiest game, but it's a win over Georgia. It's a win over the SEC East, and with everything else that happened, I'll dive into that. But everything that else happened, Gators have still controlled their own destiny in everything they have going forward. So talk about the game a little bit. I mentioned it wasn't pretty. The offense, is kind of stagnant, but I'll bring up the point of Jim McElwain with this defense that he has on the other side. He knows he doesn't have to press the issue for this offense. So, while the yardage may not be there like we want it, so of course quarterback Luke Del Rio can make some better decisions, make some better throws. You know what? He's getting McElwain knows what he can get out of this offense enough with what he has on the other side of the ball. He knows he doesn't need a 40-point performance from this offense game in, game out, and he plays within the game. Kind of like what he asked Luke Del Rio to do, play within the offense. As a head coach, Jim McElwain is playing within the game. Yeah, so Florida may only have had 231 yards, but 9 of 18 on third down. You know what? That's very important for this offense. Last year, our biggest complaint when watching these Gators was 3 and out or really, really short drives late in the season when they were going against FSU and Alabama and Michigan, and even the weaker teams in front of that. The team offense could not stay on the field. So yesterday, 9 of 18, and that's why Luke Del Rio is the quarterback. That's why Luke Del Rio has the job. He knows the offense well enough, and he's smart enough to know to keep the offense on the field. Like I mentioned, the yardage and stuff may not be there. 231 yards, only 131 yards passing, so 100 yards rushing. But it was timely. They like I mentioned, they got the third downs when they needed to. In the red zone was much better than what we had seen from the previous game against Missouri. So, and you look at the stats overall, only 2.1 yards a rush, 5.2 yards per pass. And Luke Del Rio had the bad interception when he rolled out to his right through back to the middle of the field. And I mentioned last week, if you were listening to the podcast, he doesn't need to be aggressive. Make the play calls be aggressive. Let that come from the coaches. He doesn't need to be aggressive. So don't try to be a hero. Play within the offense, much like your head coach is doing, playing within the game, playing within that defense. It's very important that Luke Del Rio just keeps that going. But overall, I thought he, after that interception, I thought he missed a couple reads, and he had Goolsby wide open on a third down. And if Goolsby catches that pass, he's still running, folks. That was Luke Del Rio missing that pass was big. And then the deep throw to Callaway, which was underthrown. We got a pass interference call out of that. But if he puts that ball on the dime, Callaway's running for a touchdown too. So only one turnover. That's exactly what Jim McElwain is looking for. Not many turnovers at all. Besides the first one, like I mentioned, it was all good from there. Another big thing, while 6 penalties may sound like a lot in general for this Florida team, it's not that bad. We know the big trouble Florida has had in penalties, but 6 of them for only 45 yards, you can't complain there. Not with what we've seen in the past. Time of possession, 37 minutes. There you go. That's where the part that I mentioned going back. Converting these third downs, we saw what this defense did yesterday, and part of that was because they weren't on the field a lot. 37 minutes, the offense held the ball. Only going to help that defense. I keep harping on what we saw last year when this team couldn't stay on the field. Defense eventually got worn out. So game after game after game, that takes a toll. So and now Florida Seems like third down conversion is very good on the season. And now time of possession is pretty good as well. So this defense, should be, after a bye week, should be well rested going into this stretch run. I will talk more about the defense later because they're an amazing job they continue to do time and time again in carrying this Gators team. But I mentioned, I'll go Luke Del Rio, 15 of 25. I mentioned 131 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. I mentioned he just needs to play within the offense. Do not be aggressive. I think after that first interception, he's settled in. It's his first game away from the swamp. It's in a neutral site. A lot of emotions going into that. His dad coached there. Jack Del Rio coached there as he was a head coach of the Jaguars. But he knew the stadium, the layout. Not a total new experience for him. But first game away from the swamp. I think we have to be happy with what we got out of Luke Del Rio. Besides missing a couple plays here and there, Jordan Scarlett, 26 carries, 93 yards, only averaged 3.6 yards a carry. Georgia, was ranked at 17th in the nation in stopping the run. Running the ball on them was not going to be easy. Like I mentioned, mostly the run game had to be opportunistic, and that's exactly what they were. Converting third and shorts, getting short yardage touchdowns when they needed it the most, to extend to gain the lead back. So, only 12 yards of it was his longest. He had the 1 touchdown. But Jordan Scarlett, we knew Mark Thompson got suspended coming into the game, and Gator fans thought that was a blessing in disguise. Now we really thought Jordan Scarlett and LaMichael Pirine should be getting the bulk of the carries anyway. So that's what we saw yesterday. And I mentioned, don't be discouraged by the full performance. Georgia has a very, very good run defense. And I just think, looking at that, it was going to be difficult. It was really going to be difficult. So Michael Pirine, 15 carries, 33 yards, only averaged 2.2 yards a carry. But he made some big plays, that swing pass to him late in the game to convert and get a first down to run some more clock out, was part of the game sealing drive for the Gators. Callaway with 1 carry, of course, the 4-yard touchdown on the end around. So that was very, very, very nice to see some creativity there in a goal line situation for Antonio Callaway. And with that play, he has scored in all 5 ways. Basically an offensive player can score. He's ran, he's caught, punt return, kick return. That's what you're. And in the bowl game last year, threw for 1. So there's all 5 ways Antonio Callaway has scored. He's the first ever Gator to do that. So he threw for 1, ran for 1, caught 1, punt return, kick return, touchdown. Antonio Callaway, I tell you what, I mentioned in the podcast last week, it would be nice if, maybe next year is the year, but if he had an all-world quarterback that could play with him, how much even bigger of a weapon Antonio Callaway could be. Looking at the receiving stats, not much there. Callaway led the way there, 4 yards, 42 receptions, longest of 21. That was the longest pass play of the game for the Gators. Deontay Lewis, the first touchdown for the Gators. He had that heck of a catch where he had to go up and get it on the sideline, snuck that 1 foot down. Plays were reviewed as they at first called it incomplete. And then a couple plays later, another third down. I keep going back to third down. You'll notice that pattern there. Third down, I believe it was 3rd and 6 on the first touchdown. Deontay Lewis catches it, breaks the tackle, and takes off for a touchdown there for the Gators. Antonio Callaway, Deontay Lewis was your 2 biggest playmakers in the receiving game for the Gators. Tyree Cleveland with only 1 catch, Brandon Powell 2, but like I mentioned, pass game just wasn't there, consistently there enough for the Gators. So, good. Okay showing for the offense. Like I said, it was more opportunistic than anything with this defense. That's what you want from the offense. I really just think, with a bye week and only 1 game in 27 days going into yesterday when they played Missouri. So it's, they're going to lose their groove a little bit with the bye weeks and Del Rio missing some games. And maybe with the hardest part of the schedule coming up, that this offense can find its groove. It's going to be tough next week on the road for Luke Del Rio's first true road game at Arkansas. We'll dive into that later this week. But you got to find the groove. Florida's got the defense to do it. We really know that Florida has the defense to carry them. But this season can be pretty good if the offense just takes one more next step. This offense doesn't have to be great. It doesn't have to be, like I mentioned earlier, 30, 40 points a game. You get 30 here and there and now against your toughest opponent, that's good. But you don't need that with this defense. Just stay on the field, convert some, short yardage plays, convert your third downs, keep your defense off the field, and the defense will help you along the way. So now let's switch to the other side of the ball. This Gators defense held Georgia to the lowest yardage output in 20 years. And if you go back and look at it, what Georgia was doing, it was a lot of their yardage was on broken plays. They had 164 yards of offense. This Gator defense clamped down. Georgia was only 4 of 14 on third down, only 143 yards passing. Here's the biggest stat. The only way Georgia was going to beat Florida was they come in and they run this game. Jacob Eason was not going to do it by himself. 21 rushing yards given up by this Gators defense. And Nick Chubb could not get going. Sonny Michel could not get going. Nick Chubb with 9 carries for only 20 yards, averaged 2.2 yards a carry. Here's the biggest. His longest run was only 7 yards. Nick Chubb's known for these big chunk yardage plays. When he gets going, Florida never let him get going. 9 carries, you could probably kind of question why they try to throw the ball so much when that necessarily wasn't working either. I understand you really weren't having success running against this Gator defense, but Nick Chubb has the chance to break these long runs. So maybe you get Florida in a bad spot, and maybe you try, just keep pounding away because the passing game wasn't really getting it done either. But Brian Harrion, true freshman for Georgia, 2 carries for only 4 yards. Sonny Michel, 3 carries for 2 yards. You really got to look at the pressure Florida kept bringing time and time again after Easton. 16 quarterback hurries. 16 quarterback hurries. Yes, 2 sacks. That's good. You can look at it that way. But it's not necessarily about getting a sack every time you get in the backfield. 16 hurries will affect the game plan, especially a true freshman quarterback like Eason. He had never seen a secondary like this. He'd never seen a defensive line like this that would consistently get back to him time and time again. And you really, really, really have to give it up to Jarrad Davis. And he led the team with 7 total tackles. We were questioning if he could even play after hurting his ankle against Missouri. This guy is a Gator. This guy loves to be a Gator. He's from Georgia, from Southeast Georgia, and he's been told he was not good enough to go to Georgia. He goes to Florida under Will Muschamp, and Jarrad Davis becomes one of the SEC's best linebackers. This game meant something to him. He wasn't going to miss it from an ankle injury. He comes back, and he leads this team with tackles. Jarrad Davis is my MVP by far yesterday, just by what he brings to the field, his presence to this defense. Jarrad Davis, you take everything mentally, physically. He was my MVP for this game. And I'll keep pointing back to him if you listen to my podcast all throughout the year. Even before the year, Jabari Zuniga was the player I counted on the most to show up out of nowhere, to be a name you maybe haven't heard of before this season had started. You could go back and look at his high school film. He's just a beast. He just loves. He's a motor grader on the defensive side of the ball. He will just mow you over. 4 quarterback hurries. So I know he had 5 sacks on the year coming in to the Georgia game. Didn't get a sack yesterday, but with the 4 hurries, he affected the game. With what you expect from him, because we're seeing this on a consistent basis now. Only 3 total tackles, but like I mentioned, it was his play, not necessarily the stats, but his play that really affected the game there. So yeah, 2 tackles for loss, like I mentioned, 4 quarterback hurries. So Jabari Zuniga, just watch out for that name. He's going to be one to look out for. And it was good to see Daniel McMillan, 4 tackles for him as well. And while these numbers don't sound a lot, the numbers for Florida with these tackles were kind of just spread out. Jarrad Davis had 5, but you had Marcel Harris with 5, Alex Anzalone with 5, Nick Washington with 4, Daniel McMillan with 4. Nick Washington, Daniel McMillan, 2 guys from Jacksonville playing in their hometown, this Florida-Georgia game, and 8 tackles between them. You got to be happy with what you had there. So I mentioned Caleb Brantley 4, Jabari Zuniga 3, May 3, Tabor 2, Duke Dawson 2, Sherritt 2, and then a bunch of guys with 1. But you look at 47 total tackles. That means Georgia's not running a lot of plays. While you may these not a lot of tackle numbers, it's because Georgia didn't run the ball, or Georgia didn't have the ball enough for this Florida defense to rack up stats as far as tackles go. That's what you want to see. Low tackle numbers are not necessarily a bad thing, and that means you're getting that opposing offense off the field when you're this Florida Gator defense. I was going to say, I mentioned Duke Dawson. What a fourth quarter he had. There were 2 drives in the fourth quarter where he bats the ball away and in big time plays to keep Georgia, from mounting any kind of comeback. So Duke Dawson, in the Tennessee game, we questioned, a lot of his play, but besides that, it was the whole defense that had that bad game. So we can look over that. He really made some good plays against Georgia. Going along there. So, like I mentioned, I think that's everything I wanted to talk about with this defense and holding Georgia, like I mentioned earlier, lowest yardage output in 20 years for this Georgia offense. So, what you're really looking for now? Florida wins. They take care of what they're supposed to in the East so far with just a loss to Tennessee. You beat your rival Georgia, and everything's looking good right now. Everything is looking good. Why is it really looking really good? Tennessee lost, upset by South Carolina. Will Muschamp ends up helping the Gators, and a couple years after he's fired, he ends up helping the Gators with Florida with the rest of the season coming up. Couldn't afford to lose another game with Tennessee on its heels. Now Tennessee loses, Florida can lose some. You got a little bit of a playroom here. You don't want to sit there and look at you may lose. You don't want to go into thinking that. But with Tennessee losing, there's a little bit of breathing room for these Gators. Tennessee now has 3 losses on the year. So out of Arkansas, South Carolina, and LSU, Florida can still afford to lose one game and still make it to Atlanta. You have to win 2 out of the next 3 against Arkansas. Looks like a more winnable game than what we originally thought. South Carolina is definitely winnable, but, of course, they'll be hyped, ready to play. Will Muschamp returns to the swamp. Jake Bentley's at quarterback now, looking like this offense has taken a next step under him. And, of course, we know the trip to Baton Rouge will be tough. So Florida has to win 2 out of these next 3, Arkansas, South Carolina, LSU, and they'll find themselves in Atlanta for the second straight year. You look at what's going on here, and Jim McElwain has these Gators for the second year in a row looking like Atlanta is a likely destination. It may not be pretty, folks, at times. I mentioned that. But, SEC East is down. Admittedly, it's very down. But Tennessee's not being able to take care of business right now, and Florida's taking advantage. That's your only loss is to Tennessee on the road at Rocky Top with a backup quarterback, and you're still in position to go play in Atlanta. You cannot ask for any more. Everything is still in front of you, not just Atlanta. Folks, Florida only has 1 loss. Now, I'm not going to sit here and I'm not saying Florida is going to go to Atlanta and beat who they play there, Auburn, Alabama, A&M, LSU, however it works out, who they played in Atlanta and beat that team there and go make a playoff appearance. But it's still there, just like I mentioned before, as this offense finds its groove, there is an outside possibility you could see these Florida Gators in the playoff. Now, would I sit here right now and say it would happen? No, not really. I mean, the offense, we still have to see more consistency from this offense. But this defense is going to give them every chance. This defense is going to go. It's going to travel on the road. Defense travels. And these big games that you got left, 2 out of the 3 are on the road. And, if I'm talking about playoff here, you have to throw that FSU game in there too. So 3 out of your next 4, 2 out of your 3 SEC games, 3 out of 4 overall are on the road. You got to go to Tally at the end of the year to take on FSU. Who they're reeling a little bit right now, but they've had a good schedule. The teams they've lost to are good. They're not losing to bad teams. So FSU would definitely be a big test at the end of the year, in Tallahassee. But Florida wins that game, as I mentioned. They win the 3 before that, and they're in the playoff hunt. And you're going to Atlanta with only 1 loss, and a 1-loss SEC champ is getting into the playoff. especially this year. The rest of the country right now is in flux. Big 12's probably lost their bid for the playoff more than likely as it stands right now. So there's an SEC champ is going to get in, definitely with only one loss. So it was a fun cocktail party. My midweek host for the podcast there, Joey V, met him in Jacksonville. We had a nice time, tailgated before the game. It definitely is, folks, the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. Now, Florida wins for the third year in a row, 24-10. This is Gators Breakdown. You can find it on iTunes, SoundCloud, here on YouTube. Plenty of time, plenty of chances to get and listen to this Gators Breakdown podcast. So I'm your host, David Waters. I mentioned you can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. You can follow me there. And folks, when you go to YouTube, when you go to iTunes and listen to this Gators Breakdown, please like it, subscribe to it, share it. That's the biggest thing. Share it, share it, share it. Like sharing, like talking with your fans out there for this, talking Gators football. There's nothing better than hopping on Twitter and having some good conversation, especially after a win over a big rival. And as I mentioned, 24-10, the Gators over the Bulldogs. So this is your host, David Waters. We'll catch you midweek with me and Joey V. We'll break down a little bit of this Georgia game as well and look forward to the Arkansas game. Hope to have Chad Neepling on with me. I bet Arkansas, if you follow SEC Breakdown, you know what Chad brings to the table, knows Arkansas about better than anybody out there. So we'll have a nice, good preview for us if we can hit that up. But we will try our hardest. So this is Gators Breakdown. I'm your host, David Waters. I will see you later this week.